What happens to Streptocarpus if you plant them too deep? In this video, I'm going to show you the results of several experiments to show you exactly what happens. But before I do, let me introduce some of my new seedlings. This one here flowers like crazy. It's a very small plant and it's been flowering ever since it was half this size. This one here also flowers well, and it has such a nice color. Right now it has 3 seed pods on it, and I'll be adding this plant to all of my future seed mixes. If you're interested in getting Streptocarpus seeds, go to my website, streptocarpus.ca, and you'll find information on buying plants, leaves, and seeds. Now back to the main topic. There is a lot of advice out there that says, don't plant your Streptocarpus too deep or they'll rot. Well, I have some problems with that advice. First of all, when we propagate Streptocarpus, we take leaf cutting. We take those leaves and we bury them a fair amount in the soil. They don't rot. In fact, if you do it right, they form roots and you get baby plants. That's how we propagate these things. And if you're interested in knowing how to do that, I do have a video for that, and I'll put a link at the end of the program. The other thing that's less known about these plants is that sometimes the roots will actually create a new plant. And that happens deep down inside the pot. And then this little plant starts to grow, and it can have several leaves. And eventually it pops above the ground. But it spends a good part of its initial life below the soil level. And it doesn't rot. So why is it that when I plant deep, it rots? So I wanted to find out if this really happens. So I set about a number of experiments to test this. I took a number of seedlings and divisions, and I started planting them deeper and deeper to see what happened. All of these were grown in my normal condition. I water from the top. I use 100 ppm nitrogen each time I water. They're grown under lights. The potting media I use is Promex HP, and I've added 20 to 25% perlite to that. I want that mixture to be a little airier, and the perlite does that for me. Almost all the tests were done in this smaller pot, which is my standard grow pot. A few tests were done in a larger pot, this one here. And this is the largest pot I use for any of my plants. I'm going to go through 3 experiments and show you the results using pictures. And then I have a 4th one, this plant right here, that we're going to actually take out of the pot as I'm filming it. I haven't looked to see how it's doing in here, but this was planted very deep, and I want to have a look at the roots, and you and I will see the results live. Experiment number 25. This is a repot experiment. I took Streptocarpus RP193, which is one of my seedlings. It had been growing well and had formed a very high crown. It was growing out of the pot. My experience with this type of growth is that at some point it's so high it no longer has a good root system and it just doesn't do very well. By the time I started this experiment, this plant was already in pretty bad shape. It had lost most of its roots, leaves were dying back, and as I took it out of the soil, it actually fell into 3 different pieces, and most of the pieces had very few roots on them. I took the pieces, planted them about 1 inch deep. I then put them in a plastic bag to increase the humidity so that the pieces would start making roots. About a month later, I took them out of the baggie, and all of the pieces had rooted by this time. Now, a few of the older leaves had died back, but the younger leaves look quite good. Here's a picture of one of the transplants several months later. It's growing well, it's showing flowers, the plant is really healthy. So planting at 1 inch deep didn't harm the plant. Experiment number 31. I wanted to try a deep planting. So on December 31st, I took one of my discarded seedlings, cut off all the flowers and buds. The remaining plant was planted more than 2 inches deep. At this point in time, it had 3 leaves. The smaller leaf was completely covered with soil. The 2 larger leaves did show above the soil surface. On February 19th, the plant had 2 new flower stems for a total of 4 flowers. One leaf was a bit droopy, but that's probably due to my lack of watering it on time. I took it out of the pot and it had a good root system, and there was no sign of rot. Here's a picture of the plant with a pencil laid over top of the plant. The pencil indicates the soil height, and you can easily see that a large part of the plant was buried in the soil. By the end of April, the plant was doing really well. A couple of the older leaves had died back, but rotting was never an issue. Experiment number 32, a high crown. My Streptocarpus PK Samba has a tendency to form a high crown. I divided the mother plant on January 2nd. I removed one piece that had a very high crown. It still had some roots attached, but the crown of the plant was about 2 inches above soil level. I planted it very deeply so that even the lower part of the leaves were buried. On April 2nd, the plant looked very good and had made several new leaves. It also had a very strong root system, similar to other plants in my collection. I also get kikis forming on plants routinely. This is a growth of leaves that happens higher up on the flower stem. And that kiki doesn't seem to make roots on its own as long as it's sitting up in the air. But I've found that if you take that kiki and bury it deeper in the soil, it will root. And I have a video to show you that. Now I'd like to have a look at my last experiment. This is number 45. The plant here is Samba again. It's a beautiful plant. A while back I divided the mother plant and this piece fell off. It had no roots at that time. And I thought, well, let's give this a try. I'm going to plant it really deep, see if it forms roots, see if it rots, and see if the plant survives. And today you and I are going to have a look at the results. As I mentioned, I haven't actually looked inside this pot yet. So it's going to be a surprise for me and you at the same time. All right, let's have a look at this plant. Now right away I can see lots of new roots down here. So the roots are forming correctly. We're going to knock some of these off. In fact, I just knocked off a lot of good roots, but that's okay. The plant will survive. Here's another new baby plant that I can pot up. Here's the main crown. Now the soil was up around this high, and you'll notice that one of the new growths is right here. You've got 2 new leaves here and a 3rd leaf over here. They're fully underground, but they're not rotting. They're doing quite well. And down here you've got a good root system below them. Here's another smaller leaf that is partially above the soil level now, but the bottom part was completely buried. This plant shows the same kind of result as my other tests. Planting deep will give you a good root system, and it doesn't lead to rot of the plant. So what can we conclude from these experiments? I think it's pretty obvious that planting deep is not rotting this plant. Now remember that I top water, and some of you grow with wicks, and I don't know what these plants would do in a wicking system. But certainly if you top water and you don't water too much, planting deep is not harming the plant. Now having said that, I'm not recommending that as a standard way to plant. I simply want to illustrate that the advice you've been getting is not correct. If you're having trouble with rotting plants and someone tells you you planted them too deep and that's causing the problem, you now know that's not true. Normally I would plant at the same height as it was before. That's what plants prefer. But there are some cases where planting deeper makes sense. Samba here likes to crawl up, so each growth is higher than the last. So after a year or two, the plant's way up high, and you really have to cut it off and plant it deep again. It's the only way to properly propagate this plant. The other thing that happens is that sometimes you divide a mother plant and you have pieces that have no roots or very little root system. If you plant that at the right height, it's just going to fall over. There's nothing holding it up. So I tend to take those and bury them a little deeper, and now I have the confidence that they're not going to rot. Bottom line, if you can, plant them at the same height. If you have a good reason why that isn't working, plant them deeper. Now, if you'd like to learn how to propagate kikis, have a look at this video here. And if you're interested in propagating from leaves, have a look at this video. Happy gardening.